Hi, welcome to this demo of IBM Spectrum Protect on IBM Cloud. IBM Cloud Catalog now offers a tile for IBM Spectrum Protect, which allows for the installation of the IBM Spectrum Protect server and client. This is a bring your own license solution, and it'll help you protect workloads in the IBM Cloud, including your Power VS, SAP HANA, IBM DB2, Microsoft REFS, and NTFS. It also gives you the hybrid ability to protect workloads in an on-premise environment. If you click on the tile in the IBM Cloud, it will deploy in under an hour Spectrum Protect server version 8.1.12, and this is deployed into the customer's virtual private cloud. And this solution is going to configure the virtual machine, the disk and object storage, and all the pieces needed to create a Spectrum Protect server that complies with the Spectrum Protect blueprint reference architectures. And these could be either in a proof of concept, a small, a medium, or a large size. Once the Spectrum Protect server has been deployed, it will also customize it by creating Spectrum Protect server databases and logs, the operations center, the Spectrum Protect client. It'll define the cloud connections, the device classes, the cloud storage pools, the cloud container cache. Basically, it'll be ready for your clients to start backing up to that Spectrum Protect server. Once the installation is finished, the customer will then take over management of that server. This will include registering their license, which they downloaded from Passport Advantage. This solution does come with a 30-day trial, so you can install it and kick the tires for 30 days if you choose. You'll also then need to download different client components that you want to utilize. And as new versions of Spectrum Protect server become available, obviously you'll want to install those PTFs also. Okay, with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Vered, to go through the installation.
So we start from the main page of IBM Cloud. This is the dashboard, and I go into the catalog. And if I click on the catalog, I will see plenty of products, and I'm going to search for IBM Spectrum Protect. This tile is coming up. I click on it, and here is the form that I have to fill in order to install Spectrum Protect. So the deployment is on IBM Cloud, and we're using Terraform, which is a scripting language, which creates the resources on IBM Cloud. I don't have anything to choose in here. It's just the default settings. There you have the options to view the pricing plans. So this product comes with evaluation mode for 30 days trial license, and then clients can bring their own license and activate the product. And here we start filling in the parameters. So the deployment runs on Thematics, which is a service on IBM Cloud, which is kind of similar, if you remember, on AWS, is the CloudFormation. So it's basically a service that knows how to create resources on IBM Cloud using scripts. What we do is we create a workspace. We have to give it a name, an existing resource group, and we can provide tags. It's not mandatory, it's just if you need so. So we can call this workspace demo, for example. And under this workspace, we will see all the resources that are being created, and we will see the progress of the installation, and eventually when it's done, we will see that the installation is over. Now we have two sets of values that we have to fill in. The first part is parameters that doesn't have any default value, and they are mandatory. The bottom parameters, it's either they have a default value or they are not mandatory, so they're optional. So let's start with the top. So first we have to provide a bucket name. The bucket here is mandatory because the user data actually of Spectrum Protect is going to be stored on a bucket. So the client has to provide a bucket. This bucket can exist or not exist. If it doesn't exist, we will create it during the deployment. Then the client has to provide an API key. So it's a basic IBM Cloud API key. This API key just has to have the required privileges to create resources. The API key should be able to create VSI servers like a virtual machine, disks, security groups, rules on a security groups, and etc. So it has to be an API key with privileges. If it's going to be for a view-only user, then probably the deployment will fail and say that there are no enough permissions to create resources. This deployment runs on an existing VPC subnet, well, an existing VPC, and since it already has a VPC, then probably the client already have a subnet, so we are requesting the subnet name. In this deployment, we're not creating a new VPC, we're not creating the infrastructure of the network. The prerequisite for this installation is to already have a configured VPC. So this is the part where you have to provide the subnet. Here is the password. Client has to provide a password for the application itself, for the operations center, and for the Spectrum Protect client. Below, we have t-shirt sizes. Those are profiles that are optional. And according to those profiles, we configure the disks and their sizes for the Spectrum Protect operation system. So the options are POC, which is equivalent to extra small. There is small, medium, and large. And actually, the full sizes and how many disks will be created can be found on the blueprints of Spectrum Protect. Below, we have the SSH key. So the only option to SSH into the servers that we're about to deploy is using an SSH key. So the client has to create an SSH key and just provide us the name of it. He has to register it first into IBM Cloud and just provide here the name. And last is the hosted name. It can be any name for the host itself. And the bottom line, we have parameters with default value, or they are not mandatory. So there is an option to encrypt your repository. So it can be encrypted, it's an in-rest encryption, and it can be done over the disks and also over the bucket. So if client provides here an encryption key, we will use it and encrypt the data. And also client can leave this part empty and the encryption will be disabled. It's not the basic encryption that we have on Spectrum Protect. This is an additional service from IBM Cloud. Next is the region where we are about to deploy the resources. We have here by default Europe, but it can be anywhere else. And also there is a logging instance key. A logging instance is basically a service that collects logs from Spectrum Protect server. It collects the installation logs and it also collects the application logs. If client already have a logging instance, he can provide the key for it and we will add this new server that we're about to deploy into an existing logging instance. And so this logging instance will collect logs from several servers. Or if the user didn't provide any logging instance, we will create a new one and send the logs into this new service. Here we're going to click on install. And this will bring us to this page under schematics service. And if we click on workspaces and go to North America, which is the default location when we install something from the catalog, we will see the workspace that we have created. If I click on it, I will see, for this example, I already have something installed. So it says that the workspace creation is successful. And during the installation itself, it says it's running. And if I extend, I can actually see the progress. This log is being written when we run. So we can see all the resources that are being created. So if it's block volume storage, or if it's resource group rules, and all the components on IBM Cloud. And then when all the components are complete, we will see actually the installation of Spectrum Protect itself. So we install the server, we install the CLI, the IBM Cloud CLI, we create the file systems, create the bucket, format the storage, and so on and so on. It might take a while. We are waiting for the SMADMC, we're waiting for the application to start. Eventually, it usually takes around an hour to complete. And then we have this pretty summary that tells us everything that was created for us. So during the deployment, we installed two servers. One is the Bastion host, and one is the Spectrum Protect. The Bastion is just the most secure way to connect to your Spectrum Protect server. It's not mandatory to use it, and client can go ahead and eventually delete it if he doesn't need it. For example, if client already have a VPN established, then it doesn't need the Bastion host, but from security purposes, we do install the Bastion. The main thing here is we provide the IPs of the servers that we just created. We create a default user called tsminst1, the default port for the operation center, and how to log into it, the bucket that has been used, the logging instance that has been created, and so on. Eventually, when we have this status of deployment ended successfully and we see that the status is completed, basically the installation is over and the client can go ahead and use the application. So if I go into VPC infrastructure and go into virtual server instances, I will find here two servers that were created during my deployment. One is the Spectrum Protect server itself, and one is the Bastion. As like rule of thumb, we use the Bastion to connect to the Spectrum Protect server, but it's not mandatory. It's just that the Spectrum Protect Bastion has a floating IP, has an external IP, while the Spectrum Protect server has only a private IP and resides on a private subnet only, doesn't have access from the outside world. Okay, and eventually when the deployment is over, client can go ahead and open the operation center. The default user is tsminst1, and the password is the password that the client gave during the deployment. Like eventually when the deployment is over, client can go ahead and log in into the operation center. On the first login, they have to provide the password that they gave during the deployment. And then the operation center will ask for a new password. We cannot skip this part. And then he can go ahead and create all the resources that he needs. So if it's a pool or jobs, alerts, and so on. Also, he can SSH into the server and run DSMA DHC commands to configure it. But actually, the basic things are already configured. So it's already find a storage pool from type cloud. For backups, it already have DB recovery enabled, and all the disks are being formatted, and the application is installed, and the client is installed. So the basic installation is done.
Great. Thank you, Vered, for that demonstration and showing us how easy it is to use the new Spectrum Protect tile in the IBM Cloud catalog to rapidly deploy an IBM Spectrum Protect server and client into the IBM Cloud that can be then used to protect your workloads that are in the IBM Cloud or as a hybrid solution to protect workloads in your on-premise environments. Be sure to check out the other videos I have on other solutions we offer for Spectrum Protect and Spectrum Protect Plus in the cloud. Thank you.